genuinely one day my parents packed up their bags and told us like we're leaving. But people still like didn't give up on life. You know, like the feeling of being separated from my dad. I think at one point he shaved his mustache and I'm like, who is that?
Yeah, the responsibility doesn't go away.
No, you know, like it stopped when we were like refugees because now we had to rely on family.
Yeah.
But now family relies on us with the war going on in Sudan.
Welcome to the 6 Degrees podcast. Today we have Hiba Adam.
We would like to acknowledge the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on where we are located today. We pay our respects to elders past and present and to all First Nations people present with us today. We would also like to acknowledge the ongoing genocide and war going on in Palestine, as well as other oppressed countries such as Sudan and Congo.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني. Today we have Hiba Adam.
Yeah, we're really excited to have Hiba with us. Hiba is a passionate organiser, student and advocate whose story is deeply rooted in resilience and community care. Hiba was born and raised in Libya, growing up during the Arab Spring, an experience that shaped her understanding of justice and identity and what it means to live through change and uncertainty. Those early experiences have sparked a lifelong commitment to speaking out and showing up for others in the form of her various activism. And now living in Naam, Hiba is a law student at the University of Melbourne. She previously served as the president of the University of Melbourne Student Union, so UMSU, where she worked to uplift student voices and fight for equity on campus. She's also one of the founding members of South Sudan, which is a collective amplifying Sudanese voices in the diaspora, and is an active organiser with UNIMEL for Palestine, UMF for Peace, standing in solidarity with global liberation movements and fighting for justice from Sudan to Palestine. Today, Hiba is here not just as an advocate, but as a person to share her lived experience and reflect on how everything she's been through has shaped her mental health journey. Her story is honest, it's powerful, and it's really a reminder of the strength that comes from community, courage, and healing. I personally have known or have had the pleasure of knowing Hiba through kind of different formats in different ways, but alhamdulillah, I mean, she's a person who I think has been very pronounced and active within the community, fighting for what's right, and I think that's really where I see you flourish and thrive the best. So alhamdulillah, I'm really happy to see her on the podcast today.
Alhamdulillah, I've had the blessing and pleasure of working with Hiba as well throughout my time at university as the president of the University of Melbourne Islamic Society and also as a member of UM4P.
Yeah, I guess as an easy question to kind of get into things, for those who are listening, could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and where really your story starts?
I think like the bio that you just gave, like that was just like so fascinating for me, like to sit back and like listen to it and just like hear my story from someone else's like viewpoint. Because I think sometimes like I don't know, like me especially, like I sometimes can have such like a narrow like viewpoint of what my life has been like or what my life is currently like. And so I just want to say like the introduction was really beautiful.
Oh, alhamdulillah.
And yeah, I've had the pleasure of knowing you guys like through different like formats, but subhanAllah, like together at the same time. Like my story. So I'm a Sudanese Eritrean. I was born and raised in Libya, and I've been in Naam for, I think now 13 years. I think in March it was 13 years. I was reflecting on that with my dad and just like how fast time has passed, and we drove past like the first house we ever lived in here.
Where was it?
St. Albans.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was, it's a great place to like land in first introduction.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah.
There must have been some adjustments.
There were many. But what a great place to land in. I think like the first thing we actually did when we got into the house is my mom started cleaning the floors with bleach because we were like, what's
this? Going on in the floors?
Like, what's going on, girl?
Yeah.
Like, why is it sticky?
Yeah.
But, alhamdulillah.
Great questions.
Yeah. 13 years here, and my life has changed like drastically.
I always find it an interesting question to ask people, like what their first conscious memory was. I mean, I remember mine in Dubai with my parents.
Okay.
Fancy first conscious memory.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh, we were in the wealthy part of Dubai. Let me tell you that, guys. We were immigrants.
Take that back.
Yeah. But I guess for you, do you remember your kind of first conscious memory or experience?
I would love to say like at birth, but it wasn't. It wasn't
No.
at birth. My first conscious memory, I think, when I was probably like, this is me like looking at pictures and thinking this is my first conscious memory. But in my brain, what I see is like me and my brother, like in, I think, the first house we lived in Libya. And he was just like born, I think he was like around like less than a year. And yeah, it was just like, I think like laying side by side, like in my parents' room. That's like one of like my earliest memories, but it genuinely might be because I keep looking at our baby pictures and I've convinced myself this is my memory.
For sure.
So maybe like a psychologist or like a doctor can confirm, can babies remember, can humans remember that far back?
Yeah.
But that's what I remember, yeah.
How old would you have been at that time?
He's a year younger than me, so like if he's 1, I'm 2.
You're 2 years old. Yeah. Love that.
Denied.
Oh, that's really sweet,
First
though.
memory denied.
It's not real.
It's not real. It's all
Awesome.
You grew up in Libya.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Honestly, it was fun. I loved my life in Libya. Like, we had my dad had been living there for like 25 plus years. I think by the time we left, it might have been like around 30 plus years. So like he was already like established there. Like, me and my siblings were born there. Yeah, like had friends at school. You know, like we never had like direct family, like, you know, like uncles and aunties, but we've had like the community my dad has had around him all his life, like living there. And so they basically were like my uncles and auntie, like you know, there were people that like raised me.
Yeah.
And I just, like they were my family. So yeah, like life was full. Life was fun, but I was only a child. So obviously I didn't really know anything about the unrest that kind of happened in the later years of my childhood. But early on, like I never had a complaint, like never imagined my life to be anything else than, what it could have been back then.
Yeah. And explain to us a little bit about your parents' background as well. So your dad, I believe, moved from Sudan, was it?
Yeah, my dad moved from Sudan and I think he's like mid or late 20s, allegedly. But he moved to Libya to pursue like, you know, university, and he lived there, he graduated, he was working there, taking care of his family back in Sudan. He comes from a really big family. And yeah, like he later, after like, you know, he put his siblings through university and just like has taken care of them until, you know, like they got to an age where they can take care of themselves. Like he moved back, he didn't move back, he went back to Sudan, and he finally was like, right, I can get married now. And yeah, I just met my mom, they got married, and then she moved to Libya.
With him.
Yeah.
Yeah. SubhanAllah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess a big part of the next part of your story involves the Arab Spring. So the Arab Spring was a wave of anti-government protests, uprisings and revolutions that swept across the Middle East and North Africa that started in late 2010. It began with Tunisia after a street vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire in protest of police harassment and corruption. His death then eventually sparked mass protests that eventually overthrew Tunisia's president, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali.
Good pronunciation.
Thank you. I'm not a native Arab speaker. You were only 11 years old, or around 11 years old, when you fled Libya during the Arab Spring. Do you remember how you made sense of what was happening around you at the time?
Yeah. You know, like that like trend where people are like, I'm reflecting on my traumatic childhood, and then they like put a clip of their traumatic childhood and they're doing like a TikTok dance or something.
Yeah.
I don't know the trend, but I found that funny. Yeah.
But it's kind of like that. You don't realize like what you're going through until like you're much older, right? So I think like during that time, the thing that I was most upset about was school getting cancelled, and I was not a nerd. Like I just really liked hanging out with my friends and going to school. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like that was the thing that was like the most upsetting, like on my list. The day that school got cancelled across the country and we all had to stay home.
Yeah.
And I remember like the TV playing in the background in the morning, and I'm wearing like my school uniform, and it's just like updates on like the NATO like has now, like kind of like gotten in. And I'm like, what? Like, you know, what is this? Like, can we just
Can we get on with
move
it?
on,
like when is this gonna
Can I
like
go back to school?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like is it like a week? And I'm like asking my parents, like, you know, like when are we gonna be able to go back? But yeah, I think like obviously there was unrest like before 2011 across like Libya and in Tunisia as well. And like at the time where like like I actually started feeling the impact of things, like things have gotten actually like worse. So, you know, first sign was like school getting cancelled. Second sign, I think, you know, we had like upstairs neighbors and they were like our family friends. Like, so I would go and I'd hang out with them. And at that point, no one was going to work anymore as well. So I remember going upstairs and then we're like watching from like the balcony, like just because like there were like helicopters that were flying. And then like bombing started. And remember like we were all just like, yeah, like being told like get down, like, and just like laying on the floor.
Yeah, like
just-
finding cover.
Yeah, so it was like never too close to my house, like where I lived, because I lived in the capital, and at that point, a lot of the unrest and like the bombing and the killing was like happening in in other cities. But yeah, like definitely at night you would hear like gunshots, and you know, people at that point were also like going out like to protest. But our position was a little bit different because yes, like my dad has like lived in Libya for such a long time, but he never like, you know, applied like to get a citizenship or anything like that during his earlier years. So we were foreigners and like basically like, yeah, like had like a visa
Yeah.
that you just had to keep renewing. But things were so good that it wasn't an issue that you had to keep renewing your visa.
Yeah.
But at that point, like that's, I think to my parents, it was like, okay, like what are we going to do? So yeah, like things just started becoming, like really uneasy for them. And I think like that's when they like made the decision like to leave.
To leave, yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, was that like a conscious change? I mean, obviously you described school being shut down, and at a certain point people stopped going to their jobs or their, you know, daily life. Was that kind of a gradual change that you saw, or did it feel kind of like it happened all of a sudden?
I think for me it happened all of a sudden, like, and mainly because, you know, like I was 10 years old. I was not like paying attention to what was happening or prices like inflating, like all of these like different things. But like I feel like it all happened all at once.
Yeah.
Like it was like at the end of 2010, things just really started happening. School being shut down. All of like, like you can't go out anymore. Like you're like now like stuck at home. And then genuinely one day, my parents packed up their bags and told us like we're leaving.
Wow.
Tomorrow morning. And like I always like I understand from their perspective, like they had to make a decision, they had to make it quick. But to me, and my siblings were like, you know, like the youngest one is 6 years younger than me, so I don't think he even remembers that. He would have been like 5 at that
old,
point, you know. But I was 10, and I remember being so upset at them because why are you moving us and why are we leaving? And my upstairs neighbors at that point have not made the decision to leave yet. So it was only my family, and all my mom and dad did like just pack, I think 3 or 4 suitcases for a family of 6.
Wow.
Like you pack your entire life, your documents, and a few like, you know, changes of clothes. And it just happened at that point. So
Eid?
so me and my siblings like wore our Eid outfits to leave.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I'm being so upset. Like I'm running upstairs like to my neighbors. Like they had like, mashallah, I think 5 girls. And so I just like remember like running upstairs to them and just like complaining. They were much older than me. But I was just like, you know, like we're leaving. I just can't believe like they're doing this. Like you know, like, are you guys leaving? Are you coming?
Yeah.
And it's like the next day we were like up early in the morning. A bus came and it took us.
Yeah.
And that was like, that was Libya.
And are you the oldest of?
Yeah, so I'm the
how
oldest.
many siblings?
I've got 3 younger brothers.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of plays into into it too, you know, like the
Yeah.
eldest daughter,
Yeah.
kind of.
The only one being conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
yeah.
I'm
I mean, you were still 10.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I'm sure they have like their own feelings about it, like, and you know, they've experienced it in like in a different way. But yeah, I think I'm the most outspoken person in my family, anyways.
Wow.
So yeah, very definitely.
Uh,
When they watch this, they're like, "Why is she telling people our business?"
Yeah. I definitely feel that way, as the eldest daughter as well.
Yeah.
I'm definitely the most outspoken in my family too. Okay, awesome. I guess.
I was in Egypt at the time as well with the Arab Spring. I don't remember the moment when we packed our bags and left. Like that's just something that's not coming to my mind at all. But I do remember like the start of things changing.
Yeah.
Like start of protesting and whatnot. And we were watching a lot of the protests in like Midan Tahrir.
Yeah.
And we started then protesting against the principal and repeating the same kind of things. And like if we were driving in the car and we'd see a police officer, we'd like start yelling at them and stuff like
Oh
that,
my
like really
God.
anti-establishment stuff.
You were really like ACAP from a young age.
Yeah.
I'm like,
That's when the advocacy started.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, subhanAllah. And I was wondering actually, did you ever like, I know in Egypt at the time, people were escaped from prison and stuff like that. We had tanks in the street and, you know, gunshots all the time. And my dad was like standing outside, all the men were standing outside to like protect the house and stuff.
Yeah.
We would sleep with like shoes on. Did you experience stuff like that? You mentioned like bombs far away. And
I think my parents left so early on. I didn't experience that, and we didn't, like, we were not allowed to leave. Like, the only person in my household that left the house was my dad, because he still had to go to work. And yeah, so like alhamdulillah, in a way, like I never saw that, but on our way out, like from Libya to Tunisia, like there were some sites that we saw like on the drive there. And then the stories that you hear about, you know, what happened to your neighbors and just anyone who stayed behind. Like,
wow, yeah.
So yeah, I think like I never got to see these sites, but yeah, I think the stories stick with you still.
Absolutely, yeah, because they're familiar places.
Yeah, it's like people that you knew or people that you grew up with, or places that you know, like you have memories.
Absolutely,
And,
yeah.
I think I remember someone sending us a picture of what our house looked like. I think 5 years or 6 years after the war. And it just like looked so different. Like I almost like didn't recognize like the building. Yeah, and I still like I always like think about like who lives in the house now. You know what I mean? Like what does their life look like? Yeah.
So you spent, I guess, your childhood in Libya, and then once the Arab Spring started, so late 2010, you moved to Tunisia. Is that right? Or
Yeah. So it was in March 2011. We moved to the border between Libya and Tunisia. I remember it being March because it was just like after my birthday as well. What a time. But yeah, I think like I'm pretty sure it was like around
March 2011.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember that because that birthday was just not that fancy, you know. Not that I used to have fancy birthdays, but, you know, we would have, like, everyone come.
Yeah.
Like, there's a cake. Like, my mom always made sure, like, we just, like, had family and friends around on our birthdays. And I just, like, remember that one being so dead. I now know why it was dead.
Yeah. Hiba, what were some of the stories that stuck with you on your journey from Libya to Tunisia?
I think like, I think like on the drive, like on the way, like out, you know, I had like my youngest brother, like in one hand, like was responsible for him, and I carried with me like one suitcase while my parents and my two other siblings carried suitcases. I'm assuming too. I don't know. I just really just remember myself like walking, but just like how difficult that journey was, like how long it was. And I feel like for the first time, like that's when I felt like an adult.
At
like,
10 years old?
At 10 years old, yeah. Like I think that was like the first time I like wore the hijab. Not because I wanted to, but I feel like the circumstances, like leaving like strange locations, strange men on the bus, and just like suddenly feeling like, oh, like like now is like the time to wear it.
Yeah.
And I think like that experience made me feel like an adult, and just like being responsible and like being like, okay, like this is not like a fun game.
Yeah.
Like we're not going on a little like road trip with my parents. Like we've left, and
You've
yeah.
left the things that you know,
yeah, like
the people you know.
yeah, like I didn't bring, you know, like any books. I didn't bring anything with me from Libya that I was like, oh, like this is my safe thing, or like this is, I don't know, like, you know, you see like in the movies like
yeah.
kids will have like their teddy bear that they've had for like, you know,
None of
and
that.
like never had that. Well, never had it, but like I didn't have that with me.
Yeah.
Like, so it was like my family really. And the story, like some of the stories that stick with me is the stories that I hear about like what have happened to like my neighbors, you know, not just like the Libyan ones, but like also the like people like me, like immigrants who lived in that country, Sudanese ones, Eritrean ones, you know, like men that went out to buy food and, you know, just got shot. And it's like someone you would have known your like entire life. And, you know, like hearing about like stories of women like getting raped or getting sexually assaulted, because like, you know, they were like raiding houses and all of these things. And so, yeah, like it's like things like that. I still remember, and I think like at the time, like you obviously, like I was like, oh, like that's really sad. Like I didn't even understand what sexual assault would really mean. But I just remember like the graphics in my head. Like I just knew like that was something violent.
Yeah. That was something bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And on the way out, like, you know, it's like, you know, when you're driving like from like Nam to like rural Victoria, and you would see like kangaroos or maybe animals. I just remember like it being dead. There was like no sign of life. There were like dead animals like everywhere.
Wow.
And no one, it's always like no one being happy. And yeah, like getting off the bus and finally like crossing the border, and there were like military personnel like at the border, checking documents and checking people, and just being like very scared, like to see just, you know, people with like rifles and all of that, and being scared that the militia as well, you know, because at that point like citizens were armed. You know?
Everyone was armed, yeah.
Everyone was armed. And yeah, so just like crossing the border with my parents, and it's a bit of like feeling just really weird. Like we're no longer in Libya. Like we're no longer in the place that I've known as my home for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that this is now like a new journey. I didn't know what to expect, or what is a refugee camp, you know? Like where are we going to live?
Or why even?
Why, exactly. And how long? Because you're not guaranteed like a spot anywhere, you know? Yeah.
And what was the experience of arriving at the refugee camp like?
It was so exhausting. Like, we arrived, and there was a section for men and there was a section for women. I think big families got to stay in one tent, even though I would say my family is big, like there's 6 of us.
Yeah.
But for some reason, my dad got placed in like
so
a
you
separate.
guys were separate.
Yeah, so my dad got placed in like the single men. Or like not single men, but like in the like men side of the camp, and we got placed in like the families, like the women and children side of the camp.
Okay.
And so we went inside this tent that had other people in there already. So like imagine if you've ever been camping, just literally imagine a tent, a little bit bigger than like your normal like camping tent, and like the flimsiest metal beds, and this thin of a mattress.
Yeah.
Along with what is battaniya in English? Now it's not coming to me.
Blanket.
A blanket,
Yeah.
yes. And like blankets that says the UN on them.
Thanks, UN.
Yeah.
So
They really wanted you to know, you know what I mean? We're here.
This is us.
This is us. Who did this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And our camp was called the Emirati camp.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Dubai bling.
Okay.
No, but because it was, I don't know. I don't remember why. Like there were people, I guess, from the UN helping,
Yeah.
maybe sponsored.
Very generous.
Yeah.
No, but they closed the camp down after like
They got their shot.
A few months. They said, we're done.
Yeah.
Pack it up. Go to the other camp, which was way worse.
Oh, okay. So essentially you're describing I guess in some ways for a 10-year-old, a not very welcoming or assuring or comforting kind of entrance.
What people call glamping. No. No, it was nothing like glamping. Yeah, it was like there were already other families in there. There were babies screaming. Every day you got more people in
In the same tent.
and every day in the same tent, and every day like someone would leave, another person would come. There are people there like who had places, who had like a home country to go back to. For us, we didn't really have that. And so so like people, I don't know, say Syria, for example. At that point, a Syrian family would come because they've just like fled Libya.
Yeah.
And the Syrian government would send like a plane to Tunisia. And so all the Syrian nationals would go to the city of Tunisia and would board that flight. So they would leave the camp. So the camp was like a transit point for a lot of people, but for a lot of people who did not have like certain futures, that was it for us.
Yeah.
And we were kind of like at the mercy of the UN.
Yeah. I think I also have some of the questions that maybe 10-year-old Hiba had. How long did you end up staying at that first camp? And did you know when you were going to get out?
No. I think when we first got there, like, there were not many like Eritrean families or like Sudanese families that we knew that were there. I think there's like one family that my parents knew, and I was meeting the kids for the first time, and I'm like, who are these people? Like, you know, it's like, okay, like, but no, I didn't. So like I went and I saw this family. I'm like, how long have you been here? And I don't know, at that point I think they've been there for like a week or 2 weeks, and I'm like, oh my god, like
2 weeks, like
I'm like,
too much.
I'm tired already. But no, like I didn't know. My parents didn't know. Like all I knew is that, like
We're just here now.
We're here now, and we're going to have to see like if we're going to be, if any country would be ever so grateful to take us. And that was not certain. There are still people from the camps that we lived in. They're still there.
Wow.
And those camps like no longer exist, and these people are just like in limbo because they have not been matched to any country. So imagine, I've been here for 13 years. With living in Tunisia, that's 14 years. Some people have lived there for 14 years.
In refugee camps.
Yeah, like
across the border.
It doesn't even exist anymore. It's not even a refugee camp.
It's like a settlement.
It's like a tent.
Yeah.
And I get curious sometimes, like, and I looked them up, and I think the last time I looked it up, there was a news article from like a few years back, like describing what these people like are going through, and it makes me like incredibly sad. So, but yeah, like to answer your questions, like I didn't know how long we were there. I didn't know what we're meant to do. It was just like, it's very confusing, very unsettling. You're there, your friends are not there, but like at a certain point, everyone I knew, not everyone I knew, most people that I knew back in Libya who were not Libyan have ended up at the camp. And then it was just like, oh, like everyone is here, like, you know, there's no school, there's like a makeshift school, and we're learning French because Tunisia. I don't speak French.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So sorry. I did not speak French. Yeah, and we would just go to the school and wouldn't really learn, but it was something. And you just hang out with your friends around the bush for hours on end. But like we made like a life for ourselves there. Like people got married there.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, people are always like, oh, like how can Palestinians like right now like have like weddings? How can they like, get pregnant and give birth?
Yeah.
Like, how can they celebrate? Like, same thing for Sudanese people. And it's like, life doesn't stop. Like at that point for us, we saw the worst, but people still like didn't give up on life.
Yeah.
People still got married. People still like gave birth. People built families there. And that's the same thing like for Palestinians and for Sudanese people, and just like any displaced and oppressed people. You face so much oppression, but like there is still that want and need like to live some sort of like normal life. And so, you know, we'd have our little like weddings, which is basically like the men would build like a little tent, like, you know, similar to the tents back in Egypt, outside someone's tent, the bride's, you know, tent.
Oh, I love that.
And the ladies will gather and we will, like, you know, like the tabla, like we will just make one out of, I don't know, plastic or something. And we will just like sing. Yeah. At that point, like, you know, I don't know, we all had like Nokia phones. No one had an iPhone yet.
Yeah.
You understand circumstances in 2011.
Forgivable.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, we would really just, just like sing songs and dance and everything. So, yeah, it was really bad at the beginning. But at a certain point, like everyone who came to the camp as a transit point had left, and everyone who was left behind are people who were waiting to be settled. So it wasn't just like Eritrean and Sudanese people. It was like people from like different nationalities. You know, there was a Somalian part of the camp. You know, there was the Iraqi camp of the camp, Iraqi part of the camp. So, you know, we had our own little nation, you know, little states, if you'd like.
I love that.
And yeah, like we carried on like living there. I'm sure like my parents were stressed and thinking about other things, and, you know, at that point, like have sold everything that they like own, and have enlisted people back who stayed in Libya to sell the furniture and just, you know, like they sent us a few clothes. I remember. I think like my uncle there sent me like my dirty like pajamas, and I was like, that's so rude. Like, you didn't even wash them. I know there's a war going on, but come on, girl.
I need clean pajamas.
No birthday, dirty pajamas.
Yeah,
and
I'm like,
Eid clothes that are now getting dirty as well. Like.
Exactly. I'm like, really, but like, yeah. At least like I was serving when I came to the camp. Like,
Of
you can, like, I
course.
had like a bright orange top, like some skinny jeans on,
Yeah.
and like this black and orange hijab. I still like remember that outfit because I really thought I ate that Eid. You know what I mean? I
I'm
was
sure
like,
you did.
Like, no one here has ever seen anything like this. And I wore that outfit for that entire year. Like, I really rinsed it. Whenever like, we had a special occasion, someone's getting married, put it on.
there. I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. I guess it's so interesting that you talk about this juxtaposition between this uncertainty and the displacement that, of course, maybe the adults were feeling, and then your perspective about, you know, children being children, you know, running around the bushes, learning French, whatever it might be. It seems as though you have in some ways built really strong and meaningful connections in the camp. I'm wondering, are you in touch with any of the people that you spoke with and lived with back there then?
Yeah. Yes and no, like in a way. So like I made a lot of great friends there. Still love all of them dearly. But no one that I was friends with that was my age got settled with us here. So Australia at that point only took like a very small number of refugees from the camp. And, you know, there was a criteria that you had to meet, like you had to be fit, you had to have like no disability, like you know, couldn't be like an elderly person, all of like these different things. And I'm sure it was the same for other countries as well. So most of like my friends actually got settled in Norway and Sweden.
Okay.
And I was so upset that they were like, and they all got settled like a bit like earlier than us.
Yeah.
You know, even my upstairs neighbors.
Yeah.
And so everyone like got settled in the same space, and we were like, okay, like what about us? Like, when is it our turn? Because we were not getting picked up by any country. And so and 13 years on, like things change. They obviously are all very close to each other. Like, and you know, Norway and Sweden are not that far apart, so people would always go to visit each other. Like, you know, like all the girls, like, you know, I would see that they're visiting each other. Like when they have a wedding, they all come together. Some of them are married now, inshallah, and like, you know, I see them celebrate each other and all of that. But like I didn't really have that. The families that got settled here with us, like none of the girls are my age. Like they're a bit older, but alhamdulillah, like I'm still like very great friends with them. But you know, it wasn't like the clique that I was hanging around with in the camp. It was not the people that were running the camp that came with me here. It was the elderly. No, I'm kidding. It's like they're 2 years older than me, but do you know what I mean? So yeah, like look, we do have that relationship still, and if I ever go to Norway or Sweden, I would obviously visit. But yeah, we just like it feels so far away to be this country. Fun fact, when we were flying in, I looked down from the airplane and I was like, what is this country? Like, why is it all flat? I was so upset. I was like, oh my God, we're going to live on a farm. Mind you, no one talks about Australia.
Yeah.
Like,
Really? Like
outside of Australia, like, yeah, like, what is Australia?
That's so true, actually. People don't think about Australia at all. outside of
Yeah,
Australia.
like, and so in my head, I'm like, I'm imagining when we get settled, like, we're going to go to one of those American houses, you know, like triangle, like upstairs, downstairs, end up in St. Albans.
Sticky floors.
Yeah. Love that. Okay.
So how can I describe the first camp to you? I didn't know it was glamorous until we left that camp. You know what I mean? And by glamorous, I mean we had food trucks that would come, like a van that would stop at each tent, and they would open the back of the van, and you'd get outside, and they would hand you a plate of food, like in a plastic plate. It would be like fasulia, you know, like beans.
Yeah.
And rice. Trust me, when you live in a refugee camp, that was it was a meal. But also like we kind of like had it like 5 days in a row sometimes, and it was like a up day. Breakfast was always like a juice box and a muffin. Not great for diabetics. Great for children who wanted sugar.
I can imagine.
But again, having that for like 6 months or so, like you get like tired of it. People at that point started opening up their own little shops. I just love like how
human ingenuity, bro.
That's what I'm saying. Like humans are really like, they were like, we're gonna get married, we're gonna have kids, we're gonna open up shops. Yes,
Entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
nothing's gonna stop us. As it should have.
Yeah, there was like a big Somali shop like back in their camp, you know, and like, but yeah, so like people like, you know, people really like lived, and so that camp was nice in that way. We had like, remember this, I don't know how they did this either, but it was like a water cooler in the middle of the desert, and it had cool water.
Wow. That's actually ingenuity.
I might be like, again, fabricating this because I was young. You know, like you
I feel like you are, bro.
No. But like, I actually, like, I remember it. Why? Because like during Ramadan, like imagine in the desert, it's really hot. Where I'm fasting, me and my friends, like we're walking around, like, you know, like my mom would like say, "Khayyattu shara," you know, like we went, like you really like threaded the streets.
Oh,
yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. She'd be really coming up with words. But like after we've done all of that, it's still not iftar time. What would we go? We'd go to the water cooler, take off our hijabs, of course, as you would.
Yeah.
And get it wet with the water and then put it back on, because that was the only way we can cool ourselves. There were no air cons.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Surprising.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
I know.
Yeah.
There was electricity though, because we were able to charge our phones. And some people had TVs at that point.
This camp really got upgraded.
That's what I'm saying. People were like actually planting things outside of their camp.
Yeah.
Like we would get water in water bottles, and people would just start planting stuff, and like they would like do like little like designs with the water bottles outside of their tents.
It touches on something really beautiful, and I think a lot of people, when we hear about these stories, like to victimize people that are going through challenging situations. But a very natural part of, you know, I would say, I don't want to say all Arab people, but I want to say a natural part of people when they're going through some challenges is to work through it and empower themselves to make the most of the situation. And I really feel like that shines through your personality and through the stories as well of the people in the camp.
Yeah. And I think that's why like it also didn't feel as bad when I was a kid, because we had these little like pockets of joy, you know what I mean?
Alhamdulillah.
The weddings, the like, you know, children getting born, alhamdulillah. And we also had like, you know, there were doctors on site. There were people who came, you know, from Libya, like just, you know, like family, like fellow family, friends and whatnot. There were doctors in Libya, and they started like volunteering there. You know, my dad was volunteering as as an interpreter. Like we like life didn't stop for us when we got out.
Yeah.
And like I remember I loved going to the doctor there. Like, you know, you really don't have much to do. You know, you've like I said, you've gone through the entire camp. There were some parts that we weren't allowed to. We threaded the streets. There were some parts that we weren't allowed to go to. We already like, you know, climbed the trees. We've done everything. So what do? Pretend to be sick and go to the doctor. As you naturally would. And yeah, so like there were like a lot of great things there, but there were also like some sad moments in that camp, as great as it was. I remember at one point, like I think there was like a militia like that was coming by or something, and people were all like gathering because like the camp was surrounded by like barbed wire. Wow. So we're kind of like closed off. And there was a gate like that you know, you had to like get permission to like leave and come back in. Yeah. So we weren't like really just like open. And there were like army and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so like I remember like the militia coming and people are getting like worried and stuff. And mom was being like, "Where's your youngest brother?" And I'm like, "What?" And at that point we're like, "Okay, we're like looking for him. We're looking, we can't find him. He's like 5." And I remember like being so distressed. Like it's like, you know those moments where you think you're about to lose someone? Yeah. And to me, like, yeah, I was just like, oh, like, where is he? Like, I remember like I was like screaming. And people don't even know what to do or like how to react. Like, we've all endured so much at that point that, yeah, like when you see someone go through something, you're just like taken back. You're frozen, and that's how people around us like reacted as well. And yeah, like I know it's all like so hazy, but I remember like going everywhere, like trying to find him. This is like a big camp. Yeah. Like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were there. How are you going to find a 5-year-old?
Yeah. Needle in a haystack, kind of.
Literally. And yeah, subhanAllah, like this kid that I was actually like beefing with for the longest, like found him and he brought him to us. Yeah. And I was like so overjoyed, like, you know, like, yeah. To think that you've lost someone and yeah, to find him again, it's alhamdulillah. It's like, yeah, like I would never wish that kind of feeling upon anyone. But yeah, like, and me and that guy, you know, squashed the beef for a few days and then it was back on. But yeah, like for my brother, he doesn't remember this. Like to him, like he was out, like, you know what he was doing when all the men gathered to see the militia? What does he do? He goes with them naturally. Right.
As you do.
As you do as a 5-year-old. Yeah, as a responsible adult.
5-year-old man.
As an old man, you go and join, just in case they needed to fight. Yeah. He would be at the forefront with his little stick. But yeah, so like there were stories like that from that first camp that I remember, but it all like wrapped up, you know. Aid was running low and yeah, like that camp shut down and we all had to move to another camp called Shusha. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Doesn't mean
I think it was like the area maybe. Okay. That's what it was about. Yeah.
And was this like, so you would have lived in the first camp for around 6 months?
I don't really remember, like you know, we don't really have calendars like that.
Fair enough.
There was one phone and it was my dad's phone. So
yeah, fair enough.
So I didn't really keep track of the time. I'm sure my parents have like a better recollection of how long we've spent there. But you know, we had, and I say that camp was luxurious because now when we moved to the second camp, we actually had to line up for food. There was no van going around, you know, delivering fasulia to us anymore. There were lines of people waiting in the morning to get breakfast, again for lunch and for dinner. Conditions were a lot worse. The tents were not as I hesitate to say that the first camp was nice because it's not nice. It's a refugee camp.
Yeah.
But again, worse.
Comparatively, yeah.
You know, like you really like drop down. There was no sense of safety there. There were like I just remember like my parents already not feeling safe there. But in that camp, that's when my family all actually like lived together. And people also had like a bit more liberty on how they wanted to build their tents because we built we built our tents at that point, and like no one was really building the tent for you. And so I remember like we had like an upstairs storage like in the tent that some of the men in the camp like helped my dad build. But it really didn't matter at the end because the camp was always subject like to flooding and to sandstorms. So that would happen, and then you would have to rebuild your tent again. Yeah. So yeah, so like that second camp was really like such like a different experience. And some people at that point were like already leaving. Yeah, and so yeah.
What were you waiting for here, and what was the situation like about leaving the camp?
Yeah. I think, well, I was waiting to be resettled, because everyone was hearing that, like, are you going to Norway? You're going to Sweden. You're going to Denmark or whatever other European country that was accepting people at the time. You're going to the US. And we're like, okay, what about us? Where are we going? And just like praying really hard, like to be able to leave. Again, alhamdulillah, my family was privileged, like to be able to use whatever money my parents like were able like to get at the end of our stay in the camp, because it was like everyone had left. Almost everyone like that we knew had left. There were only like some small families that were left behind, and conditions were getting worse. Like you're not getting food as frequent. Aid is running out. There was like no doctor. There was no fancy doctor on site.
Couldn't visit the doctor anymore.
I could not visit the doctor anymore. There was no school. Like people, I remember like one of the saddest stories is like, it was so cold in the desert, like during the night, like extremely, extremely cold. And at that point, people were getting like heaters, you know what I mean? And there was like a tent full of like just young men, like young boys, that's like ended up like burning overnight because of, I don't know, it was like electricity malfunctioning. And this is like only like a few meters away. This is not like a house in another suburb. That's like,
this is in your camp.
This is in my camp. Like we can see it. And waking up in the morning and people try to stop the fire. There's no emergency vehicle that's gonna come and stop the fire, and there's no fire doctors truck on site. Like there's nothing like that. It was like really the people taking care of them. And Allah yarhamhum, like they passed. There are many other stories like that of obviously it was very unsafe for women as well. It's like I haven't, but my own experiences, but just other people's experiences as well. Being at the camp as a woman and not being able to walk at night. Or like even during the day, really. Like, there were parts of the camp that we just were not allowed to go to. You want to go to the bathroom, you always had to take someone with you. There was no, I need to go to the bathroom now, bye. There was like, I need to take someone with me all the time.
Yeah. And you understood, I guess, the seriousness and the gravity of the situation as well, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think at that point, like we've already been living as refugees for a while. Like, and as time goes, like your hope also diminishes.
Wow.
And as people leave, you start to wonder, like, what about me?
Yeah.
When am I next? Yeah. But at that point, like, we were going for like interviews at the UN and whatnot. Trying to like resettle us, my first exposure to white people. Yeah, like we just ended up getting settled, like I think it was in March 2012. Okay. So we left in March 2011 and we got picked.
Full year later
after my birthday again. Another dead birthday.
Another dead birthday.
And I remember being so happy. Like I was... like, I think up until a few years ago, if you asked me, what's your happiest memory? I would be like, being picked to come to Australia. Because we had nothing. Like, I was like, what?
No, completely understandable.
Like you've been wearing the same clothes for a year.
The outfit was not eating anymore.
The orange outfit was not eating. It was like last season. Your friends have left, you know what I mean? You're not learning. No, you have nothing going on for yourself. I actually picked up crocheting. There because the kind old white women from the UN would do that. And I think they had like a photography course at one point. Like, they're really trying to do arts and crafts. Yeah. But yeah, things like slow down, people don't come to visit as often. Like we used to have like people from like news stations come with their big cameras and try and interview people and go inside tents, and that's why like I feel so icky when I see like people traveling to like just any oppressed or underprivileged like part of the world, and they want to video the people and they want to like hear their stories and all of that, and then like they put it out like, and I just feel so icky because I was that person once.
It's really performative.
And when I was in that position, I literally ran away. they had like the camera like strapped here. And I can see that they were recording. That's the thing. They also think you're stupid for some reason. I'm like, just because I'm a refugee. Like, who said I was stupid?
I know.
And they would like try and talk to you, try and get like some
snippets, real,
exactly.
Yeah,
you know,
some
like
catchy line out of
exactly.
you. Yeah.
And I remember like literally like running like out of the tent and like hiding my face. And obviously that might not be everyone's experience. Maybe some people like are okay with that, but to me, like I just, you know, I was so uncomfortable with it, and I'm still so uncomfortable when I see that kind of stories or like that kind of like positioning of refugees or asylum seekers or But sorry, like to go back, like I think like that was like the happiest moment, like to be picked and to be accepted, because I was like finally like we don't have to like stay here any longer. So like we left in March 2012 March, probably like the 26th or something. Like, you know, they transported us to the city. We stayed in the city, and it was like so fancy. You know, a hotel room. Meals.
No fasulia.
No fasulia. I think at that point we're not eating fasulia anymore. We're eating worse. No, I don't remember. But alhamdulillah for everything. Obviously, whatever we ate,
alhamdulillah,
nourished us and carried us. You know. And
I'm sure that was the least of your worries as well.
No, like I think just really wanted to go back to school. Like you really don't understand like how much like it affects like a child like to not be able to learn. You know, and not to be able to have any kind of structure. Until like you're in that position. But then we went from Tunisia to some UAE country, God knows, from there to Sydney. Sydney one night, overnight, and then
St. Albans.
Then St. Albans,
Sticky floors.
Sticky floors, St. Albans. And 2 shopping bags from Coles that they so kindly gave us. But I remember like we're like looking through, we're like, there's tomatoes, can of tomatoes, pasta. We're like, what are
we going to do with this?
People think just because like you've had like a really like maybe like you were poor and you came from like a refugee camp, you wouldn't have taste.
Where's the salt,
I have taste.
pepper, spices?
I was like, we had like we had taste, girl. Come on, like you guys couldn't do like a little bit of like seasoning, you know? Couldn't do maybe some chicken. Had to be vegan. No hate, but like, come on.
But hey,
I'm like, if you think we were poor and like, you know, like malnourished, why didn't you give us some meat?
Where was my protein?
But at that point there was no halal meat like at Woolies and Coles, you know. They probably did not know what halal butcher is.
No. I think it was a time when halal wasn't very popular. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of moving back and forth, things you understood, things you didn't understand. And as kids, we can't really understand all of our parents' emotions, but we're hyper aware that something's going on. What was sort of running through your minds as you looked at your parents?
I think it was like, I didn't understand it at the time, but I can clearly see that my mum was that my mum was like, for example, frustrated at the conditions we're in, and you know, like the feeling of being separated from my dad for like a while. Like we still saw him, like, but you know, you go from living with your parent to like not living with them. You just see them around. Like I'd literally see this. I'd see him around the camp, like hello, you know, like stranger. I think at one point he shaved his mustache, and I'm like, who is that? Like who is that man? Like now you have no hair and you have no mustache. But like, you know, just feeling so weird and different about it. But like I think like I was aware that they were struggling, and that they, you know, like they obviously had us at the forefront of their minds. Like, and I know they worried so much about us, like, and in the conditions that we were in. And they always like looked forward to when we would be able to get out from there. And I think just like, you know, like my parents are private people. Like my family in general is private. I would say I'm a private person to an extent. Then here I am on a podcast sharing my life story. I will say this is the most I've ever shared.
Wow.
I don't think, like my closest friends even know like some of the things that I'm sharing. So thank you. So now I'm just gonna give people a link to this podcast and whether like What about you? You know, who are you?
Just listen to this.
Just
You
listen
go.
to this
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm not repeating it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I know that like we're always worried about our futures, and yeah, like I always think about like, you know, they have their own families, like outside of like our little like, you know, unit. Like my mom comes from a big family, my dad comes from a big family. You know, like my granddad on my mom's side was still alive at that point. Her mom has just passed away, like I think maybe like a year or two before we left. And just like that longing for your family like never leaves you, and I still see it in them now. You know, like yeah, like it's just crazy. And I look at my siblings, and you know, like one day like we'll all inshallah get married, and or like just like live like different lives, like, and we'll no longer be under the same household. But I still just cannot imagine not living in the same city as them. And that's why like I would like probably like never leave Melbourne for too long, because I want to be like close to my family. I just can't like I just can't imagine like a reality where like my brothers are not close to me, or like my mom and dad are not close to me. So alhamdulillah, like being able to be resettled with them, because like some families like did not get the chance to get resettled like together.
Yeah.
You know, like some of them, the parents were too old, so no country accepted them, so they had to stay back, and their kids had to move on because they had their own families. Like, you know, like some of them had like kids.
Wow.
You have to also think about your kids' future. It's like a tough situation. There's no right or wrong decision in that instant, you know? Like who do you stay back? Do you go? And so alhamdulillah, like I think I didn't realize that at the time, but like I know, like obviously like for my parents, they were just like always worried about like where are we gonna go, the cultural shock,
And
the environment, the community. Are we, you know, you'd hear stories about people who went to those like Scandinavian countries, and not to say that doesn't happen here. It obviously happens, not just to refugees and like, you know, like immigrant families, but also like the indigenous people, where like there's like child removal.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't live up to those Western ideals. You know, you don't have the same culture.
Yeah.
They see something they think is problematic.
Yeah.
You know, like why is the kid having curry every day in school?
Yeah.
But you know, like we make light of it, but like we've heard stories like that from other people. You know, their children being forced to like maybe attend school functions that don't align with their values.
Yeah.
You know, like, alhamdulillah, I was never forced to like, I don't know, like do anything like during my like my school years. But for some people in these countries, they were forced. Like, oh, you didn't go to the party. That means like something is like wrong in your household.
Something's up.
You know, then they do welfare checks.
Yeah.
So they were worried about all these different things, like how are they going to navigate life in a whole new country with like no prospect of like work as well.
Yeah.
Like
That's
no
a
one,
scary
like
part.
like everyone who came here who was a doctor back home, like was not able to like become a doctor like that. People had to study again. You know, some like a lot of people came here as like working professionals, but their degrees almost meant nothing.
Yeah.
And some of them are still like studying now, trying to like get like employment. You know, like my dad when he came here as well, like he came at it was like almost like retirement age. So like no one is hiring you when like you're close to retirement age. You know what I mean? And so we really just had to build ourselves like from the ground up. And that doesn't take a year or two. It doesn't even take 10 years. It takes longer. And when you come from a background where, you know, now we're here, we still have to support our family back home, you know? Like my parents never stopped.
Yeah, the responsibility doesn't go away.
No, you know,
Yeah.
like it stopped when we were like refugees because now we had to rely on family.
Yeah.
But now family relies on us. With the war going on in Sudan, like we take care of our family back home.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like with things like that, like generational wealth does not get built.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe like inshallah, when I have kids,
Inshallah.
I will rely on them to build that generational wealth. But right now, like it's really all about survival.
Yeah.
Like, but alhamdulillah, like things do get better. Like, and I used to work with like as a multicultural aide at a school, and you know, I'd work with like refugee families, and like sometimes I'd have conversations with parents or with the kids where I can see that like they're struggling, that they're in the same place I was in when my family first came here. Like that first few years, like it's so hard. Like there's no end in sight, like of when things do get better. But like eventually they do.
Yeah.
Like
Even though it
slowly,
doesn't feel
slowly,
it.
like like things get better. And like that's what I was reflecting with my dad on when we were driving past our old house.
Yeah.
The way that he just like knew where to turn,
Yeah.
like mashallah, like his memory, alhamdulillah. You know, like driving past there and like reflecting. Like we didn't even have a car back then.
Yeah.
And now like we're, you know,
Alhamdulillah.
like we're driving.
And how does he look back on that time, and what was the conversation like when you were having it together?
I think my dad is a very grateful person. Alhamdulillah. Like he's very resilient. Both my parents are. Like again, you know, with their families displaced from Eritrea, displaced from Sudan, displaced in Libya. Like you kind of like build up like that resilience. I've never heard him complain. Like
Wow.
I've never ever heard my dad complain about anything. He's always like such a grateful person. And so, yeah, like even like when we were like, you know, driving past that house and just like talking, and I'm like here making fun about that bag of tomatoes and the sticky floors, and he's here saying Alhamdulillah, you know? And I'm like, we've been here for 13 years, you know? And he was like, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. And I'm sure like he has his own feelings about it, but he's like, yeah, such like an independent person. And he like that reflects back on me, like the way that I am as well. It's because of him, you know, like his resilience and his, his commitment to his faith, both him and my mom, like they passed that on to us. And so like that's like another reason why like sometimes people don't know like the extent of like my story or like my family story and the way that we came here. It's because I've just been brought up with the idea of like you have to keep going, like you can't give up. Like I saw my parents struggle when we first came here, you know, like that loneliness, the isolation, the uncertainty of like, you know, like you used to have a house, you used to have a job, you used to have a salary.
Now what?
And now, yeah, like you just, you don't have that.
Yeah.
You just have to keep going. So that's like, yeah, that's how I reflect back on how they were feeling. And yeah, like I still probably will never know like the extent of how they felt during that time or how they feel now, because alhamdulillah, and unfortunate is like sometimes is that they're just like really strong people. And whenever like you know, like I tell them like, oh, like this was really bad like back then, like the fact that we witnessed that, like they will be like alhamdulillah, you know, like what can you do? Life goes on. It could have been worse. So sometimes that is like there's some strength in that, but sometimes like it does make you feel like, oh, maybe what I went through was not that deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, that's probably how they were raised
And
as
how
well.
they cope with it as well.
And how they
right?
cope with it.
Yeah.
Because what are you meant to do? Like you have 4 kids to look after.
Yeah.
You have to look forward.
You have to look forward. Like there's no way that you can like stop and not move.
No.
You have to move. Because even if for them, you know, there was nothing else that they can do, like, you know, there's no goals, like let's say like they were like, okay, like there's nothing like for myself that I look forward to. There were things that they were looking forward to for their children, for us.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what kept them going. You know, they would have chosen like to leave Libya, to live in a refugee camp, to come here if they didn't have us.
Yeah.
If it was just them, I think they would have lived a very different life.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, they have us, and yeah, we're here. And I don't think they would change anything about like our journey. You know?
Absolutely. Oh, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them.
Reward them, yeah.
They sound like incredible people, and I
hope
see so
to
much
meet
of that in you.
Oh,
Alhamdulillah.
thank you.
You're getting gassed up too much today.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess I'm also wondering, I mean, we touched on it briefly earlier, but I think the dynamics of being the eldest daughter always, you know, is something that I'm fascinated by as the eldest daughter
As the
myself.
eldest daughter.
But how did that play out with you and your siblings, and I guess arriving in a country where you were the oldest, where perhaps you were the most knowledgeable at that point in time amongst your siblings? Did you ever feel that pressure or that need to protect them and comfort them from, you know, the dangers of the world like your parents did?
Yes and no at different points. I think I wanted to also be a child. You know, like I wanted to make mistakes and I wanted to like have fun and do all of these different things. But I was also like in this position where I was so hyper aware of like our situation. Like I knew like that we were struggling. You know what I mean? Like I knew like life is so different, but for my brothers, like, alhamdulillah, like I feel like they were able to like pick up quickly, like on things. You know what I mean? Like I was the only one who went to like a language school, and they were actually placed in primary school. So I was in this environment with like people of all different ages, like up to the age of 18, allegedly. And they were in a primary school with their peers, living somewhat like kind of like a normal life. And so, yeah, like I just like felt so hyper aware of like being a refugee. Everyone else around me was a refugee. You know, for them, yes, in their little classes, some kids were refugees, but like out like during recess and lunchtime, there were other kids. You know, and they were able to like participate in like different like classes that were not exclusively for recently arrived like refugees or like immigrants. And so I felt that like that sadness in a way, like that I wasn't able to go like to high school like straight away. And we had the ugliest uniform. It was like two colors, blue or red, like navy or red. Fleece jumpers,
Love.
for winter.
Love.
Like normal, just like t-shirts for summer. So you know, like you're wearing like the ugliest uniform. Everyone knows where you're going. Like we didn't even have proper uniforms. They had the little school uniforms. So I never went to primary school here. So like after like like going to language school for 6 months, I went like to high school. But I think like the real responsibility came when like I actually started high school here, where I felt like I couldn't fail. I couldn't fail because I had my brothers after me, and like my parents have always told me like they look up to you, even though they'd like to say they don't.
Of course they do.
Apparently, they don't look up to me. Like nothing I've ever done has mattered. Like you know, but my parents have always said to me, you know, if you didn't make the right decisions, they wouldn't feel like they have to. And I think for me, like that was always like echo in my mind, that like I have to make the right decisions. I can't fail. My dad would have loved if I was a doctor, you know, and that's what he was trying to like really like encourage me to do. But like I never had a mind for like science or maths, and you know, being a lawyer was like second best choice.
Wow.
Yeah.
All the lawyers out there,
your second best choice. No, I'm kidding.
No.
So like I felt like I needed to go to uni. You know, I needed to do like
the best you could.
Like the best. Like I couldn't do subjects like drama in year 11, even though like I loved doing it. Like as an elective and all of that. Like I didn't go to house parties. I didn't even go to birthdays, let alone like house parties, you know. But like people would have birthdays in like high school. I couldn't go. You know, and that was because my parents, again, it's like a cultural shock for them. They don't trust the community. No, and I'm not talking about the Eritrean or Sudanese community, but they don't trust the community that we're in, the general, like the general
Western
public.
Society.
They don't trust them. You know, they don't want their kids going to like another like family's house that they don't know. I couldn't even go to the shopping center with my friends. I couldn't hang out with my friends, period. There were only family friends that I was allowed to hang out with. But outside of that, like I just, like it was really just like school. I didn't have any extracurricular activities like outside of school. So like school was my everything. And I really like poured like my heart into it. And I recently ran into like a friend from high school, and they told me like, you used to be so much more reserved and like head down.
Wow.
And I reflect on that because like that's the way like I was like, I can't fail. I have to go to uni. I have to get the best grades. And alhamdulillah, like I did, and I was able to get to where I am because of my parents and because of the academic pressure. But there's also like sometimes I'm like, oh, like I wish I went to a birthday like during high school. Like I wish I can look back and be like, oh, like
Have
you
some
know,
memories,
like
like to be frivolous.
Yes, like I wish I remember, like I went to High Point like on that day. I didn't. You know?
Wow.
Or like I've got the bus with my friends. Like you know, I was never able to do all of that. My brothers had a little bit of a different story. Like they were able to do that, and not because necessarily like they were boys. Like my parents have never raised us up with the idea like men can do this and women can't. You know, but because at the point where they were like old enough to do certain things, my parents have gotten comfortable with the idea. So, you know, they were comfortable with them like playing sports like with like like at the local like footy club, you know. They were comfortable with them going to our neighbor's house. All of these different things, because at this point we've been here for 5, 6, 7 years. You know, they've seen it happen with other people. They trust some people enough. But for me, it was like such a different experience.
Yeah.
You know, and the pressure like never stopped when I got into uni. Like it was still like, if you put your head down, you do well, your brothers are also going to go to uni. They will feel the pressure.
Their future was on your shoulders.
Yeah. Like if I made a mistake, I always had to think about my brothers, and I couldn't make a mistake in front of them. You know, like now obviously they see more different sides of me, and they see me make mistakes and all of these like different things. They're all old enough now to know better, and to know that like just because I made a mistake doesn't mean that they can make the same mistake.
Yeah.
But back then, like I just I had to hide a lot of like who I was, and I couldn't really go to any of them and be like, oh, like I did this, like I messed up.
Yeah.
Like I need help, I need guidance.
Yeah.
I would like to say they were able to do that with me. They were able to rely on me for like advice. So something maybe that they wouldn't feel comfortable asking my parents, they were able to come to me and say, X, Y, and Z happened. What should I do? They were able to ask me about school, about university. I had no one to do that with. I had to figure out, like, what do you do at uni? You know, how do you find friends at uni?
So
what is a
relatable.
lecture? What is a tutorial?
Yeah. How do I get around uni?
How do I get around uni?
Yeah.
What is a
Who's gonna
tram?
show
Like, you
me?
know? Like,
Yeah. How do I use PTV?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I was able to do that for them. I was able to direct them when it comes like, oh, like you can actually apply for scholarships. You can actually do this. You can do that. A lot of the things that I did were the first for my family. You know what I mean? First person to get a scholarship. First person to like just like travel interstate. First person to do that. And so like, you know, like when you're experiencing all this first, like from my parents, like there's always like pushback at the beginning. Not because they hate me as I used to believe, but but because they're worried, you know, like in this like foreign environment. So it was very like interesting being the eldest daughter, and it never really stops being interesting.
No, it doesn't. And I feel like in different ways, I definitely relate to you there about like feeling the pressure of, you know, my life being linked to theirs almost, and my successes and my failures being linked to theirs, and, or deciding their successes and failures. And especially, I think I sometimes have a lot of, you know, this deep resentment sometimes. I'm like, you know, like I had to figure out everything myself, you know, they get to just like ask me for it, you know. And of course, like subhanAllah, like they're great kids as well. Mashallah. But I definitely feel and relate to that experience of being the eldest daughter and having to kind of carry it all sometimes and figure it out by yourself.
You really like do figure it out yourself, and then, you know, you do like a little handover.
That's exactly what it is. It's a handover. You're like, I did this wrong and you should do this better than me. And like, you can do this instead. Yeah, absolutely. That's
like
a nice
getting
way
an
to
extension at uni. My first extension at uni was like at the end of my like second year.
Same.
Because I didn't even know you can get an extension if you're sick. Like I was like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
You know? I was able to let my brothers know.
Yeah.
Just like as simple as that.
Alhamdulillah.
Having an Islamic society at your university. I never went to like the musalla like in my like undergraduate years, because I was like, oh my God, like how do I navigate it? Like where do I go? Like, you know, is it like, are people in their friends already? Like all of like different things. But like now, like my youngest brother's at the same uni as me. MashaAllah. He's already settled in, you know, second year in, and he's got more friends than I've ever like had in my first few years of uni.
After everything you've experienced, displacement, instability, a certain level of uncertainty, how did you hold on to a hope for a life that didn't necessarily look like this? And specifically, how do you manage to hold on to trust when you have systems around you that may always not be reliable or safe?
Yeah. Again, I think, alhamdulillah, it goes back to my parents, like having hope. They always wanted the best for us, the best education. Like my dad was relentless when it came to like parent-teacher interviews. This guy would go in, if we didn't get a good enough grade, he would be like, hold him back a year.
No.
Have you ever seen a parent like tell the school, like hold him back a year? They would be like, no, we can't do that. It's like literally not allowed. I'd be like, just like like he really wanted us to be like the best versions of ourselves. He would always, like, both him and my mom would make sure that they were like present, like they were so present in our lives that like I always felt like there's more that I can look forward to. Like they've always been so supportive of our education. Like I think they would love for me to do a PhD after I finally graduate this degree. But like, do you know what I mean? Like they've just always been like a big motivator to like don't stop, keep going. And so like that obviously has given me hope. But I think like also like freedom, like wanting to like break away from the environment that I had when it came to school and just like find myself and just find like those little pockets of freedom that you get to have when you go to university. Just catch public transport. Like, again, for someone who never did that when they were in school, I was like, I'm going to Melbourne Central, like my dream place. Like get a job. Like my parents were so on like education that we couldn't even like work during school. So like, like I got my first job at like 19. And I was like, my own money?
Yeah.
Oh, I was so frivolous. Like I bought anything and everything I saw. Yeah. But so that always like gave me hope. And I always like saw myself like doing something. Everyone says like, they obviously want to see themselves like do something important. But I always like dreamed for more. Like I knew like being in that camp was not the end of my story. Like, alhamdulillah, I always like felt like Allah had like more in store for me. And so I held on to that. Not to say that it wasn't difficult or like that. Of course. I was always like motivated, but alhamdulillah, I'm at a place where I can acknowledge like my strengths, and one of them is being resilient. Yeah. Like if I want something, I will get it. It might take me like a long time, and I might like cry about it, feel frustrated, and get like, like depressed, and just be like, that's it. Like my life is never gonna get better. But I will wake up the next day and I will keep trying. And that's what I kept doing. Like every day, like just knowing that I wanted to do a law degree when I was in year 9. And I took a picture in front of like Uni Melb with a friend. And I finished year 12 and I went to Uni Melb. I did my undergrad and I got into law. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. Now I'm at the end of my degree. And I'm living my like my du'as, like what I asked Allah for, like he's putting me through it. Alhamdulillah. He's carried me through it, like, and and just like the hope also, like while my parents wanted my siblings to also follow in my footsteps, I wanted them to also do better than me. I wanted them, like I wanted to do well so they can do well. So they can feel like if they want to go to uni, they can go to uni. If they want to get a job in whatever industry, they can do that. And I've always been supportive of whatever like endeavor that they would want to go on. So like when I got into uni and then my siblings started like, I'm getting into university, and they would come up to me and be like, oh, this camp, Hiba, do you think I should do it? I'm like, do it. This opportunity, this networking thing. I'm like, whatever it is that you want to do it. You want to volunteer, go and do it. Like all the things that I was never able to do, like I want them to do it. And I want them to be better than me. And that's what has given me hope. And the fact that Allah like did not abandon us throughout our journey. Like it's insane to like be living in a place for 10 years and to know it as your home and your people and everything, and to lose that in like a day and to leave and to be like here now. There are many people that we know that have died along the way. Families that didn't make it. Families that got settled in other places and their children were taken away, or have just like, have not had the same opportunities that we have had. But I have, so how can I lose hope when Allah has like, again and again shown me, like, showed me that there's more.
And there's more, yeah.
And so, like, that's why like like I'm here, and that's why like, as like depressing as life can be sometimes, especially with everything going on, I just can't imagine myself stopping. Like if I stop, then what am I telling Allah? Yeah.
SubhanAllah, I really like that reflection.
That's so powerful, man.
Yeah. I feel like, that really touched my heart. So jazakallah khair for sharing with us about it. I mean, I guess in kind of the same stream, Hiba, you strike me, and for the moments that I've spent time with you, you're a deeply empathetic person. And sometimes with things like this, we fall into the trap of comparing ourselves, saying our difficulties are easier or harder than others, and kind of, falling into the trap of comparison. But I know that this isn't you. Whatever someone's going through, wherever someone is at their life, I know that you're there for them, and you're there for them, like, for real. I guess I'm wondering, how do you still manage to maintain your empathy despite the challenges you've gone through?
Yeah. I think I've been such like a go person my entire life. Like my friends would tell you I had 4 jobs on the side and was studying full time at one point. And that's because I was just like, I can't stop. I have to keep going. And yes, like I think with empathy and with like wanting to be there for people, my mental health did struggle. Like I would love to sit here and be like, I actually managed it all well, but I'm only human at the end of the day. And there were many times throughout my life, especially through like my adult years, where I was like, I really can't keep going. Like I want to be this poster child, this like refugee, like from rags to riches story. But in between, there were just like moments where like, I'm like, I can't keep going. Like, I don't want to go to uni anymore. Like, I want to give up. I don't want to work. I don't want to go out with friends. I want to be in my own, like, little bubble. And yeah, like I think, alhamdulillah, I had like amazing people around me, and my mom especially, like shout out to her, like where she really like looked after me, and she really like, she showed me like a level of like care and love where I felt like I can show that to other people as well. And so, yeah, like I think with my parents being such thankful people, sometimes it come with that like our situation is not as bad as other people.
Yeah.
So whenever like I saw someone struggle, or whenever I was there for someone, I would like, if I was also going through something, I would always tell myself it's not that bad. And for the longest, I never thought like my story as a refugee was that bad. Because, like we'd go to school, or you'd see on the news of other people's stories, and then you'd be like, okay, like at least I had food. At least my parents are alive. Alhamdulillah, So, yeah, I think with like stuff like that, like it, like sometimes like it made it difficult to be kind to myself and to offer myself like the support. And it wasn't like until like later on where I felt like, oh, I can reach out to people. I can talk to people about this. I can let others in, and I don't have to feel embarrassed about being a refugee, about struggling. Everyone's life looks so polished on the outside. To say that like, oh, like I was once a refugee, like, like we didn't have money, like we didn't have that. Like it feels embarrassing. It felt embarrassing. I don't feel embarrassed about it anymore. I don't feel embarrassed like to come from the background that I'm from. That's what made me. And if people look at me now and they're like, oh, like, mashallah, like she has a good life, or like, oh, mashallah, like she's doing this or that, then, like I wasn't born this way. I didn't just become like that. Like Allah has put me through like trials and tribulations, and I've really struggled like to get where I am. And so with all of that comes the empathy as well.
Yeah.
When I see like, like when I worked with families that had similar stories to mine, I never looked at them with pity or with the feeling that, this situation is so bad, like I have to be kind to them. But I genuinely, like, I looked at them like, you will do a lot more than what you see yourself doing right now. I remember like this one family where the mother was telling me, my kids are all, like, they really like you, and they keep saying like, we want to be like Hiba when we grow up, and like that, so like made me cry. Like when she told me that, like, and I was going through like a really bad time in my life, and I'm like, oh my God, like these kids like look up to me. Like, and when I was like talking to them, when I was like helping them, like get like school supplies and all of these like different things, I looked at them as like they were me. Her daughter was me.
Yeah.
And I spoke to her not as like a, you know, like, oh, this poor refugee, but as like someone who had ambition, someone who has a future, and someone who will go and do like great things on her own for herself.
Inshallah, yeah.
Inshallah. And she is now, you know what I mean? Like, I think she's graduated high school. She's like, you know, like living like her life and all of that. And so, like the empathy comes from my own like lived experience and wanting to do what maybe I didn't have. Right. Wanting to do to someone what I didn't have at the time.
Love that. I mean, you again kind of touched on it in this answer, but when you're forming relationships with people who don't know this part of your story, you know your background as a refugee, and some of those experiences, how do you navigate that? Like, does it ever feel as though that there's a part of you that remains unseen when they don't know that part about you?
Yeah. I think that touches on like your last question I didn't answer, like the trust for the system.
Yeah.
Kind of ties into this question.
Yeah.
I don't trust the system. I don't trust any of the systems. Most of the systems that exist around us. I think, like I didn't trust them back then. I still don't trust them now. The way that I navigated is like I trusted people. And there are people throughout my life who I've trusted and they have delivered. And what I mean deliver is like, you know, like social workers or like teachers or just people with authority. And there are people who failed me, you know.
Yeah.
There are people who've used my story for their own like gain.
Yeah.
But I still decide to see the good in some people. Not everyone, because like you don't always have to. If someone is showing you like, you know, their true colors from the beginning, you don't have to have personal done. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
For me personally. But yeah, and I think like that ties like onto your question now. It's like, do I feel like, you know, like when someone doesn't know my full story, like am I unseen? I think for the most part, like I would prefer like some people not to know my full story.
Yeah.
Because people look at you in a certain light when they realize like what you've come from.
Yeah.
You know, for those who maybe like grew up in the West, like, you know, it's like that feeling when you go to uni and you're talking to someone who grew up like super rich and they ask you where you're from and you say Sunshine and they're like, where's that?
Yeah.
and you're trying to like describe, oh, like, you know, Footscray, like, you know, like, no. And I'm like, oh, well, like the train goes to Sunbury, stops past Sunshine, you know. And it's the same thing. Like if I just say to someone, oh, like I'm a refugee, the first thing in their head, like labels, exactly. Yeah, you must have gone through this, you must have experienced that. And a lot of it might be true, but some of it might not be. But who are they to decide my story or who I am? So yeah, I think for the most part, I just like wanted to forget about that bit. There's that feeling, like, you know, there's that feeling at the, like that we've all might have experienced, like wanting to assimilate. And you hear that word so much, like when you first arrived to this country.
I hate it.
They be like drilling it into your head. Assimilate.
How
like,
are you going to do it?
Yeah, like this multicultural like society. Melbourne is
We're
a melting pot.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's not melt.
No, let's not. Let's not all be the same.
Yeah, let's be different. Like, you know. And so, yeah, like I think for my friends, like I felt like I've shared certain parts of my story throughout like my friendship with a lot of people, but they'll always get so affected.
Yeah.
Until now, like sometimes like I'll be like, oh, like that thing happened, you know, especially with now the images that come out of, you know, Gaza and Sudan, like some of it is similar to my story. Not to that extent, alhamdulillah, but like some of it is true. And I would relate, and then someone would literally, like a tear would drop from their eye. Like, but I get it. They feel like they love me so much that they're affected that this thing happened to me. And for the longest time, I didn't understand, why are you crying? Why are you emotional? Like, I'm not even crying. Like, I'm here and I'm like cracking jokes about this thing. And it wasn't even like in a trauma response kind of way. Like, I genuinely didn't think it was like
that deep.
Yeah. You know? And here I am, like with a friend, like just sobbing. But yeah, I think like throughout my friendship with a lot of people, like I just like started sharing snippets, and I realized like that there was so much power in sharing my story, because they were able to like see me as like this person with more than just like, like what I'm showing, but also like for most of us, like your friends know what your childhood was like.
Yeah.
They would know what primary school you went to, or like your best friend from 3rd grade or stuff like that. For a lot of my friends, they didn't know that.
Yeah.
You would have maybe something in your house. You're like, oh, I owned that when I was like 5.
Yeah.
I didn't have that.
You didn't
like,
have that physical.
We only have small things that we brought with us from Libya, like an outfit.
Yeah.
My mom still kept like my first ever heels, and I still have them. And I don't know if I'll pass them on to my kids, but I'll keep them. Because these are the only things that we have from Libya. I actually don't think my brothers have anything from Libya, but I have my pink heels and this skirt that I have, and I think even a coat that were all obviously like used when we're in the refugee camp, but for the weddings. But like it's things like that. Like I want to show, like I realized I wanted to show my friends who I am, and I wanted them to be part of my story, because if I'm so close to you, like yes, like I should share with you, and if I feel comfortable with like sharing all the different parts of my life, what I'm going through currently, what I want to do in the future, why am I not sharing this, like this story?
Deeper part.
Yeah, this deeper part of me.
And I guess you wanted to own part of that story as well. Like if you give the headlines or, say I was a refugee or whatever, immediately you're going to get that label. But when you guide them through that story, it's like, hey, this is me, this is what you know about me, and these are the parts that I want you to know about. Yeah. It's completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
For many, displacement often lives in the body, Our body sometimes reacts to stress or fear in ways that might be connected to our earlier childhood difficulties. For you, it may be some of those times within refugee camp, or just in general, I guess, running away from some of the unsafe situations you were in. I guess I'm wondering if you relate to your body, this feeling this way, even if your mind has moved on.
Yeah. I think like the way that I've like noticed this the most was when, like the genocide in Sudan started happening, and like I was just like so sad, obviously, like because my family's there and because my people are suffering, and because we don't deserve this, no one does. But in my body, like I was like actually like sick a lot of the time, like when all this was happening, like last year, and I reflect on it now and I'm like, oh my God, like that was like the stress, the trauma, the feeling of like hopelessness and just like not being to materially change what's happening to your people. And I was telling like my friends, like, I was like saying, well, no Eritrea, no Sudan, no Libya. Like there's nowhere like I can go and be like, oh, like I'm going to go back home, guys. Like I'm going to go visit my family. I'm going to go on a little holiday. Like, and whenever people would say, like, like, oh, I'm going back home, like I'd feel so happy for them, but I'm like so sad. Like I'm like, oh, like I don't have that place. And so, but inshallah, like Sudan can be free, and, things in Libya are like a lot better than they were a few years ago. And Eritrea going through its own thing, but, alhamdulillah, like inshallah, one day, like we'll be able to go back. Like that, I think like displacement in the body for me, like it was like a sickness.
Yeah.
Like that every single time, like I see an Instagram story or Instagram post or Twitter post, like was like a news article of a refugee camp of people like, from Gaza or from Sudan, from any other part of the world, like living in refugee camps, I would immediately be reminded of my own. Yeah. And I would feel so guilty. I always feel so guilty. Until now, I feel so guilty to be able to live a life that they're not living right now.
Yeah.
And try to live through it, try like to push. And I remember like, when there were weddings happening like in 2023, like just like after October 7th. And I remember like telling my mom, like, I don't feel like I can celebrate. I can't, I don't want to go to this wedding. I don't want to go out. And she was like to me, like, I understand, but life doesn't stop. And I'm like, she's so right, because like when we're going through that, sometimes I would talk to people that like my age, and I'm like, what were you doing in like 2011? And they don't have this recollection of struggling or looking back at like people in like that, like in the Middle East or in like North Africa and being like, oh, I can't go to school. No, like I can't go to uni. They're going through this thing right now, like so I can't like live my life. And so while we carry on living some kind of like trying to find some kind of like normalcy in our lives, I know for me and for like many other people like as well, it's like people in Sudan, in Gaza, like are always at the forefront of our minds. And that's like that part of like displacement that still lives in my body. Like I'm feeling guilty every single day. I'm feeling like I haven't done enough, like every day. But I'm feeling stronger every day, like to keep pushing. So whenever like I felt like I'm so scared, like to do this thing, I'm so scared to speak out, I'm so scared like to give a speech, I'm reminded back to what I went through, and that I wish, and I don't know this for a fact, that someone in 2011 in some part of the world felt so upset about what was happening to us that they were speaking out, that they were talking to their friends and family, that they were doing fundraisers, and that they kept pushing on with their lives while still doing all of that and praying for us. And so, yeah, like I think like it will never leave me, like feeling displaced. Like the only place that now I can call home is Nam. There's no other place where I have a life. Like I've built my family here in a way. Like my friends are my family. Like the community around me is like now my family, and so there's like nowhere else for me. And I think, like that feeling of being displaced through generations just carries on with you. It's like my parents, like and their parents have all left a place because they couldn't live there anymore. And for me, like I left Libya because I couldn't live there anymore. And so I hope I don't have to leave.
Inshallah.
Like now, inshallah, and like that I can like have a life here.
You spoke about navigating feelings of guilt, and something that strikes me as incredibly crazy, right, is you worked so hard to get to uni and you put so much emphasis on your education. It's such a big part of who you are and what you value, and you're able to basically gamble with that to be a voice for so many people.
How my parents would also love to know. I think for me it's just like there's no other option. There's literally like no other option. Like, what do you mean I have all of this, like, in some way privilege, and I'm not speaking up? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't compute in my head that I can be a university student at Melbourne Uni, that I'm, like, I know that my university is complicit and I'm silent. People make their own decisions at the end of the day and they decide what's too risky and what's not. But to me, I would rather risk all that I have and to know that at the end of the day, I did my duty as a Muslim. To not do that would be a failure. I just, it literally just like doesn't make sense to me, like to not speak up. And yes, it is risky. And like the fear of like, imagine like, I don't know, I'm in my final semester and they're like, oh,
thanks.
Bye. You know what I mean? Exactly. Salam alaikum.
And that's literally what was hanging or what they held over your heads.
Yeah. And they did, you know what I mean? Like, if you do this, I remember like the first motion that I passed, like the pro-Palestine motion in 2021 or 2022. And just genuinely being so scared to walk around university, being stalked, being doxed. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. And I couldn't go back home and tell my parents. Like now they know a lot more, but back then it was like, oh my God, like they're like, don't worry about the government, worry about my parents. But just feeling like, there were no like pro-Palestine protesters, there were no like big activists around like the university. I wasn't even like I didn't even do it from like a whole activist perspective. It was just something that I believed in. And I thought like that I was going to be met with applause, like, you know, just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
normal, like like that we're all human and we
Yeah,
all
yeah.
comprehend that, you know.
Lawsuit, bang.
Yeah, lawsuit. Yeah, bang. You know, suddenly unsafe to be at the university. Suddenly can't go to class because I'm shaking. Like, you know, I don't want to go to uni. Like, I'm scared. Like, I'm like looking over my shoulder, news article after news article after news article. Like, you know, just like the Zionist lobby, and I'm like, oh my God, I have ruined my life. And the university offering me zero support. In fact,
course.
like doubling down. You know
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I
I think
mean?
they called you out. Actually, do you want
Yeah.
to tell people what the motion was that you passed? Just
Yeah,
for
it was
context?
just like a motion, like to stand in solidarity with Palestine, to recognize it like as, you know, as a state, you know, to just say, you know, like to call out Israel, to say Zionism is bad. Like it literally looks just like something along these ways. This was a long motion, and then, you know, like we submitted it, we thought it was all good, and now suddenly I had like all these people coming at me. I had-
Pre-October 7th as well.
Yeah, 2022. And I had all these people coming at me being like, you are anti-Semitic. You are doing this. And like, you know, the first time that you get called anti-Semitic for something that you don't think is anti-Semitic, and I definitely not anti-Semitic, you are like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And no one is standing beside you aside from your fellow peers.
You see how the world works all of a sudden. Again, I think perhaps you can correct me. Your first exposure was the camp and seeing, you know, that unfold and change place. But also when you came to Australia and then when you entered uni and you started dabbling in these things, you're like, okay, this is how the world actually works.
Yeah, like I was doing like, you know, like activism in the refugee space, like before like, you know, my activism when it comes to Palestine. But I really saw how powerful people can be when they didn't agree with you when it came to Palestine. I saw how bad the university cracked down in 2022. And I was so scared. Like I just had so much fear in me. And you would think I would stop and I would be like, silence. Like, no, I put up another motion and I still passed it and got slapped with a lawsuit, like while I was at the student union. And you'd think I would leave the student union by then, but I in fact went for the president position. And I carried on. Alhamdulillah. And
What was running through your mind? Like you were scared and then, okay, like right now I'm scared.
right now I'm scared,
But there's no option.
but there's no option.
We move forward.
You know?
So you just doubled down.
What is that? Like think like, don't back down, don't.
Yeah.
But
The chant.
the chant.
I don't know, but
But you know what I'm
I
talking
know what
about.
you're talking about.
The
yeah.
young people will know.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was just like, I'm not backing down
Yeah.
and I'm not staying silent. And it wasn't only me, like, you know, like Dana was there, like, you know, Muhammad was there as well. And they all like in their own right
Refugees.
suffered as well. And we all like carried each other through that tough time. But yeah, I was just like, I'm not going to be silenced. Like what's the worst that can happen? And I always kept telling myself, that was like, alhamdulillah, at the end of the day, I'm going back home to my mom and dad. They can do whatever they want to do to me at uni. I can be bullied. I can cry in my car. I can do all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go home to my bed,
Yeah.
to my family,
Safety.
to
Yeah.
safety.
Yeah.
And so I just kept going because like I'd go home, it's all safe and dandy. I'd go out, get bullied, but you'd carry through. And I did. I went for the president position. I got it. Alhamdulillah. Like I continued with my work. And I remember like still getting like literally stalked for the, like any Palestine activism I did, they would like always catch me on it. They would literally like screenshots. Like once like we got like screenshots of like the things that I was doing. And I'm like, oh my God, like, can I live?
I know. They loved you.
No, but
They're
like, yeah,
obsessed.
exactly. Like having fans like that really did like kind of like motivate me. Like
Yeah.
that's when my delusions for fame started. But yeah, and then like, you know, October 7th happened like in 2023. At that point I was no longer the president. So alhamdulillah, like a normal student. And I couldn't wait to be a normal student.
I remember that period actually. I was
I
trying
know.
to drag you into UMass and you're like, no,
and I was
let me
like,
breathe.
no, like I want to breathe. But did I breathe? No.
No.
I
Straight on the
suffocated.
ventilator.
Straight to UM4P.
Yeah.
And I started like, you know, like volunteering and became an organizer with UM4P because like, again, it only makes sense. And it's not because like I was born to be an activist or like I was born to do this work. I don't think anyone wants to struggle or wants to like dedicate their entire life to like advocating for oppressed people, because you don't want to see oppressed people in the first place.
Yeah.
So you don't like, I don't know. Like I never grew up being like, when I grow up, I'm going to help poor people.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't have that in my head. But what made sense to me at that point was like, I can't stay silent. My religion doesn't tell me to stay silent. My values don't tell me to stay silent.
My experiences.
Exactly. My lived experience doesn't tell me to stay silent, so I will not be silent. So we did what we did at university, you know, like I remember like there's like one instance where like I was arguing with like university like spokesperson. I was like really having it like with him. And I remember like that video like being spread around so much that my mom saw it. And she was like one day to me, can you not argue with cops? And I'm like, oh my God. You
It's
know,
your own people. No,
it's your own people. They'd be like, stay silent. No, but you know, she was like out of fear, because like she was
Of
scared. Like, you know,
course.
like you're doing
Yeah.
all of this. Like, what's gonna happen? Like, I'm not in a position where I can always be like,
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna go to uni. I'm not gonna get a job. Like, I
Yeah.
can live off like my family savings. No, like I have to do all of this. I have to like live. I have to like support my family. You know. So while there is the fear, like I believe like Allah is the best provider, and that the things that I do are not just because I want to do them. Like Allah has put me in this path. Allah has put me at this university. Allah has made me meet the people that I've met throughout my journey, and I've become so much stronger in my faith. Like, you know, like as I grew older,
Absolutely.
and the more work that I did in this space, the stronger my faith has become.
SubhanAllah.
And so, alhamdulillah, like I just feel like I'm just like not gonna stop.
Inshallah. Yeah.
So yeah, it just only made sense.
Yeah, and it's like, what are you going to keep? Like at the time when a lot of people say this, like you get your degree, you depend on your degree, and you get a good job. But we realize, especially with your experience, how quickly life can change and society can shift and things can be displaced. And ultimately, the ultimate provider is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
And so, like, mashallah, your intentions are so pure when you're advocating. You just have you have complete faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect you.
Yeah.
But I want to dial back to
Yeah.
the encampment. For people that don't know, UM4P ran an encampment supported by the University of Melbourne Islamic Society, and we were living in tents again. That must have been a whole
That was like the hardest time of like my time at university. I don't know if you remember, but we just had work to do every single day.
Bro, I remember.
For a month. There was no
remember.
break. There was no weekend.
Yeah.
You know, I started like running during that time. Like, and I would go to this like run club every like single Saturday. I was no longer running. I was running at the encampment. I was running, trying to make sure that, you know, whenever we had people breaking like late at night, like, you know, like patrolling
Yeah, we were patrolling.
the encampment. But yeah, like that fear of displacement again came back, like seeing those tents. Like I personally could not stay in the tents like overnight, because it triggered me so much that I couldn't live in that space. Not to say that I would never go camping, but like the environment that like it was in, yeah, like it was like I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I wouldn't have been able to do the work that I needed to do with UM4P if I stayed there. But I was there every day.
You were.
And so was like a lot of other people. You were there every day. And we worked tirelessly, like, and there was so much fear that came with being at the encampment, right? Like, it was like police are going to get called at any minute. Like, you know, the university can just, I don't know, like they can really do like anything and everything. And we can see now with their crackdown of like, you know, Wi-Fi policies and banning indoor protesting. There was so much fear that came with it. But I looked at everyone around me, and I looked at like, especially like my Palestinian peers, and I was like, if you can keep going when your family is currently eminently in danger, then I can keep going.
100%.
If you like, and they kept going, and yeah, it only made sense that we also kept going. Like, you know, if my family back in like Sudan are still living and breathing, and they are looking forward to a future where their kids can go to school and everything. Like that's the thing that they're worried about most. How can I, currently getting an education, sit back and try and stay like within a safe bubble?
Yeah.
I couldn't.
I mean, Hiba, because you embody kind of so many different identities, many people look to you as a voice for refugees, for Black women, for Muslims. Do you feel the responsibility or pressure to represent all of those communities?
Yeah, I think like It's so hard sometimes to just like exist, you know. I'm
Like neutrally. It's
yeah. Oh, just like
it's
not even
not.
neutral, just like to, you know, like an NPC.
Yeah.
God, like you don't understand. Like I used to like dream of like the 9 to 5, just boring, nothing on the side to do life. Is that the life that I'm living? Absolutely not. Alhamdulillah, I'm grateful for my current life.
Alhamdulillah.
But yeah, like having to like represent so many different communities and all these expectations that are placed on you can be so tiring because I'm like, I don't want to fail any of them. You know, if people look at me as a Muslim woman, you know, like I don't want to misrepresent Islam. I don't want to go somewhere and say something and then that is their view of Islam, Hiba, you know, or as a black woman represent suddenly all black women, or just like all refugees. I had a different experience. Like a lot of refugees have different experiences.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially in this country. You know, we've got asylum seekers, we've got people that were held up in detention centers for 10 plus years. Their stories are very different from mine. You know? And I don't want people sometimes to like maybe hear my story and maybe like there are parts that are like, oh, that's not too bad. Like you had food, you had your family, and to think that like other refugees had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
You know, some people had much better experience than me and others have had like just a really bad experience.
Yeah.
And so I think like I find like, like I share my story as like Hiba's story. It's not my sibling's story. This is not my family story. I'm not a spokesperson of my family. I'm not a spokesperson for anyone. But like in a way, like yes, I do represent like these communities. So there are like some shared values that we all have as Muslims. You know, speaking up for our like brothers and sisters. You know, speaking up for what's right, standing up for justice. Like these are things that like I don't think anyone would ever be like, oh, that doesn't represent Islam. But there will be other things that like, you know, like I might have as like, you know, as a person that I'm interested in that doesn't necessarily have to do with other Muslim people or as a black woman that like maybe I don't share with anyone like else. And so, yeah, I think I struggled a lot like when I was younger, like with this, like especially being in spaces that I've had access to for the first time, like a scholarship. And suddenly that, you know, they're taking your picture, like you're the first black Muslim woman they've had and they really need to put you out there in the community.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's nice. Sometimes someone would be like, oh, I saw your picture in like this booklet. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, really, like, you know, it's so like great to hear your story. Like it made me feel like I could apply for this thing. And I'm like, oh, like that's nice. Like that I was able maybe to represent the community that you're from and that you felt comfortable like when I shared my story. But other times it can be like, oh, like let's dial it back a bit. This is just Hiba.
Yeah.
This is not refugee, Muslim, black Muslim. You know, I'm like, I'm going
Diversity quota tick, yeah.
Hiba.
Of course.
So yeah, but like you can't control the way people see you. You know, like yeah, like that's up to people. Like you just share the parts of yourself that you can, and at the end of the day, like yeah.
And it's beautiful also that people get that sense of relatability
Yeah.
or comfort or shared experience with you as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a beautiful thing within itself.
Yeah. I'm like, if I've embarrassed myself and I've like shown you like my full self, like if you can find some comfort in that and if you can find some strength in that, like to feel more comfortable in your own skin, then I'm happy with that.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
And looking at where you are now, how has your sense of identity evolved since, you know, that young girl arrived in Australia?
Yeah, I always just like think about how shy I was. My family wouldn't say I was shy, but like my friends would tell you that like I was so like reserved and soft-spoken and I've never put my hand up for any opportunity ever. I never believed I was good enough, you know? Like I was that kid that had like a strong accent and I think I still do have an accent, you know? Like, and people always be like, where are you from? Until now, you know? Like, and that always made me feel other than. But now I'm proud when people ask me, where are you from? You know, because I can be like, oh, well, actually, I'm from da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
I'm more confident in sharing my story. Like, I would have never done anything like this. You know, I would have never spoken up at a rally. Like, and it always feels so surreal to me when I'm in these places. Like, even right now, it just feels like a dream. Like, it feels like I'm just existing and I'm like, just like talking. And alhamdulillah, like, yeah, to have that confidence, to know that like as much as I have struggled with, you know, my identity, with my mental health, with my advocacy, the imposter, like, you know, syndrome of being at, you know, like Melbourne Uni and doing law and all of these things, like I'm able to tackle all these feelings that I never was able to do before. And that's because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because of my parents' support, and because of like my wonderful friends and siblings, you know, and the community that I now have. I remember like my first few years at university, I was so scared to go to the musalla. Do you know what I mean? But now, like, I walk in, I know people that are inside. Like, I can pray anywhere on campus, and not because I feel so safe at the University of Melbourne, but because I'm so strong in my faith now that I'm like, this is who I am. You know, alhamdulillah. Like, I can show who I am, and I don't care like how people perceive me anymore. I know how I perceive myself. And I know who I am, I know my values, I know my faith, and no one can tell me otherwise. So I show up being me in the most authentic way. And sometimes I'll struggle with it, but most days it feels good. And in the days it doesn't feel so good, like I'll sit back, I'll reflect, and I'll pray. And I hope that I can keep showing up. Because just like how when I first came here, like I wanted to relate to someone so badly, I hope that I am just a relatable person, and that people can hear my story and like the things that I've gone through and feel like, oh, like it's not so bad, you know, like she went through it, like I can go through it. There is more to life. Yeah, I'm only in my 20s. Like I look forward to, inshallah, many more years, and you know, like showing up in different ways, and like I look forward to like see like where I am 10 years from now.
Inshallah.
And we look forward to seeing it, and we have so looked forward to having you on this podcast and for you to share your story. I mean, again, I'm touched and I'm moved by all of the beautiful kind of reflections and revelations you've given me, and I'm sure that the audience will also benefit greatly. And there is definitely someone who's listening to this who is going to relate and who is going to take away that thought of, you know, she can do it, I can do it too, inshallah, because
and
I
be
feel
better.
that way.
You can be better.
Inshallah. But you have high standards to live up to, I must say.
High.
Yeah, the bar is high.
You guys are too kind. Thank you.
But Jazakallah khair, Hiba, for being on our podcast. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners and viewers, and everyone behind the scenes who has made this possible.
Thank you for being with us today. If anything in this episode felt heavy or difficult, please reach out to someone you trust. You can also contact Kids Helpline on 1-800-55-1800, which is a free counselling service available 24/7 for those aged 5 to 25 years. Or you can book an appointment with our Helping Hands team on the website 6degrees.org.au. Take care of yourself, and inshallah, we'll see you next time.